A lot of people enjoy retro gaming because of the nostalgia, but that's not always the main reason. The games play, look, sound, and feel completely different to what most people are used to today. And that's what makes vintage systems interesting to me, despite not having grown up with a lot of them. A few years ago, I was thinking, how old can I go before systems and games become too expensive or rare? And I think this is the answer, the Atari 2600. In my case, it's the 2600 Junior specifically. I don't think there's anything that has a better retro to price ratio. I wonder why they don't call it the 2600. The Atari 2600 Junior is a redesign that came out in 1986. It's supposed to resemble the 7800 to make it look a bit more modern. The same sort of idea has been applied to refreshed consoles by other companies, of course, like for example the top-loading NES and the SNES Junior. Despite looking so different from its predecessors, I think the 2600 Junior is rather nice to look at, though mine's not in the most pristine condition ever. It looks a bit like a front wing of an old F1 car, or those massive front lips that some Bozazoku cars have. The switches are sunken into the case for a flush look. The fact that it has switches might seem a bit unusual for anyone who's only used to the newer stuff. We've got the power switch and color and black and white on the left. Pretty self-explanatory there. Select and reset on the right. Depending on the game, you scroll through the game modes or difficulty settings with select and start the game with reset. It's interesting because these buttons change settings that would normally be found in a menu in modern games. The back has the controller ports, AC jack, 2 difficulty switches, and the AV out port. You also get a channel selection switch because that's just how things were back then. I just put a coax adapter on the cable and connect it directly to the TV. No need to fumble with any weird boxes. To get the footage, I actually connected it to a VCR, which I then connected to my game capture device using composite cables. Or is it composite? The cartridge port is exposed to the elements and can get dirty, but that problem is easily solved by just leaving a game in there. The cartridges have this protective thing that slides out of the way when plugging the game in. You can clean the contacts by inserting a flathead screwdriver and using a Q-tip and some rubbing alcohol. One way to clean the cartridge port is to apply rubbing alcohol to the cartridge contacts, put the game in, take it out, clean the contacts again, and then repeating that process a few times until you're not wiping off any dirt anymore. It works quite well. I was able to get the system, a couple of controllers, including paddle controllers, and all these games for around $50 Canadian. That's a pretty good deal. The pawn shop I bought it from even allowed me to pick whatever games I wanted. I'm guessing no one wanted the system, which is why it was so cheap. I think most people want the older models. The wood grain models with 4 or 6 switches are what most of us think when someone says Atari 2600. There are other variations with different colors and branding, but generally speaking, they'll cost more than the Junior. Obviously, if you can get a good deal on one of the old ones, then go for it. I'll say that most of the popular games held up pretty well. I can play Asteroids and Berserk for hours. I think everyone not familiar with the classics would benefit in experiencing them. They're really cheap and offer plenty of entertainment. Even Pac-Man, which on the 2600 is a crappy flashing and flickering mess, is still kind of fun. But I wonder, how did they make it look so bad? Other games don't look this bad. You may notice that I have 2 copies of some games. I think I just got some with better labels. I didn't bother getting sports games because, those won't be any good. It's interesting to see that there's such a contrast in pricing too. Popular games only cost $1 in my local shops, but rare stuff can get very expensive. Since I'm more interested in playing games on actual hardware than collecting for the 2600, I'm quite happy to pay the $1. As iconic as the Atari Joysticks look, I don't think most people would want to use them if there are other options. The joystick is stiff and a bit tiresome to use in my opinion. I use a Sega Genesis/Mega Drive controller. A lot of other consoles and computers use the same port, like the Commodore 64 and the Amstrad CPC computers, so there's a lot of other options you can choose from. I grew up on an Amstrad CPC 6128, by the way. Nothing like a little Who Dares Wins and Cauldron. And I always used a QJ Superstar, which was amazing. It had a very good arcade stick-like feel. I really liked it, though I remember the buttons binding on occasion if you didn't quite hit it on the center. I think the Atari 2600 Junior is a really good and affordable way to get your vintage game on. There's a lot of interesting and fun games, and I really enjoy the fact that I have to physically press buttons and switches on the system. It's an interesting kind of interactivity that just doesn't exist nowadays. I think the graphics have a very interesting style with bright neon colors, and the sound is something else. If I ever make a video about best sounding game consoles of all time, the Atari 2600 or VCS is going to be in it. The explosions sound awesome, and I love the sound of the shooting in Berserk. It's so good. But that's going to be it for today's video. I haven't played this thing in a while, so it was really fun to mess with again. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, click the like button or subscribe. Hit the bell icon to get annoying notifications. I have a Twitter account you can follow as well, and Patreon is available for anyone wanting to support the channel. You can get early access to new videos and see them before they go public on YouTube. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video.